Hey, Dave Licali with HeadGames Motorworks. Today we are going to talk about valve locks. Check it out. We had a problem with valve locks yesterday, and we were installing on a 2JZ head. We were putting a 2JZ head together, and the spring height just wasn't right. So we took a look at the locks, and the locks didn't look right in the retainer. And that brought us down this road because we're always using this particular valve lock. It's from a, it's a very good valve lock. So, but the problem is that valve locks are actually very hard to manufacture. And you see a lot of people selling them, but they're not all the same. They might be a different call out for their tolerances. You know, like, so picture any of the companies out there that sell valve train parts, they're all going to have a different tolerance of what they want to see. And we've never seen this tolerance out of this company before, but so the valve lock was way off and it didn't look right in the retainer. So then we tried the stock one, we tried different brands, and then we even tried an older version of this lock that we already knew worked. And lo and behold, it is just a new batch. And although I'm not at liberty to say who it is because I don't want to get sued, there's no reason for me to put that out there. The only way that you would know as a consumer is by measuring. And that brings me into, like, I'm always preaching measure, measure, measure. If you measured this, you would see this thing was way off. It was like a millimeter off of their old batch. So just because you buy it for your car doesn't mean it fits your car. So and that's a lot of the valve train out there. I know it's really hard. I always get a lot of guys that want to install their own parts, and I definitely push back on that because I feel like they're just going to stick the shit in there and they're not going to actually measure anything, and then they call that an accomplishment when reality is that that is not an accomplishment. You just threw some parts in. You're a parts exchanger, and that's not what we do. We measure stuff, and that's how we find stuff. But if you follow this page, and I've definitely preached it. I've shown how to do this before. If you guys want to see a video on just checking spring height with normal tools, I can do that. So I might just do that anyway, but definitely comment below if you want to see that. But let me show you what we saw yesterday. All right, so what we got here is a used set of valve locks. These are, I'm not going to mention names, but we have, we're going to have three different locks. So we have that one, we have this one here. This is the new batch. We're going to do a OEM, and we're going to use a 5064 retainer from GSC. What we're going to do here is we got a GSC valve. This is the 6.5 millimeter 2JZ valve. And then we have their retainer, and we have our trusty Harbor Freight caliper. That's right. You don't need $1 million caliper to do what I'm showing you guys. And we have a razor blade. So the razor blade is going to be so we can put it on top of the valve and you can measure from underneath the spring. I'm going to show you that in a second. So the first order of business you're going to do is you're going to take the caliper, you're going to zero it to the razor blade. So now we're going to zero that, and this way it's almost not even there, basically, right? So we're going to double check ourselves. We are good. Now we're going to put here's the retainer and the lock. And we're going to put the stock valve locks in first. And the stock lock is actually what this retainer was made for. So you pull up on it, make sure it's nice and tight. This thing don't move around at all. And you're going to look underneath here and make sure that the valve is not protruding underneath the retainer and it doesn't rock. Everything looks good. So we're going to take the razor blade, and this is how you guys are going to check it at home. You're going to take the razor blade, and there's a little hokey here, and you're going to go underneath the retainer to the top of the razor blade. We're at 167. That's the number, so we're going to write that down, and we're going to take this off. Now we are going to do the used kit. So the used kit, this came on a 5266 dual spring kit. pull up on it. Now you'll notice that the top of the locks in the retainer are a little bit more sunk. And then, but you look underneath the valve, underneath the retainer, and what you don't want to see is you don't want to see any of the locks sticking out. Now this is the same manufacturer as another lock that we're going to show here, right? So this is perfect. We're going to check this. See that? 167. So this one is just like OEM, sets right up just like OEM. We are perfect, good to go. And all right, so that's that one. Same manufacturer. This is just a newer batch. Are you guys ready? And this is why I'm saying you should always measure. So pull up. Now the lock is much more sunk on this one than it was on the last one. And the other issue is not only is it more sunk, but the lock sticks out from underneath the valve, and underneath the retainer. So the locks are basically pulling through the retainer without doing anything. And what this does is it's going to change spring height. That's what the whole thing we're going to do here. All right, so this is the same manufacturer. Where are we at? 142. So we are already way different. As you can see, if you didn't measure this stuff, you would have a different spring height because the spring or the retainer is pushing down on the valve, and now we just changed that height completely. We changed it by almost a millimeter. And for what? Because you bought a product, and now you could make up for the height. I'm not comfortable sending heads out of here with the lock pulling through the bottom of the retainer. I think that's a really bad thing. And this particular manufacturer, I cannot say anything to them, so I'm not going to, but maybe they'll watch this, I don't know. But the issue is that the spring height is also very imperative, because you might, you would definitely run into an issue. You don't want to be a millimeter off of spring height for no reason. If anything, you want to be tight. So if you're going to be off, you want to be off tighter than looser, because looser, the spring acts like a slinky and it moves around, it loses spring pressure, and then you're going to have a bad time, you're going to have a failure. So be sure that you guys measure everything that comes whenever, or have somebody who does cylinder heads, not mentioning any names, but somebody might do cylinder heads and knows how to measure this stuff. Make sure they do that, or comment below. I can absolutely show you how to measure it, but you won't have a spring tester, and I think the spring tester also helps a whole bunch. All right, so what we got here is we got the 5066 conical spring from GSC, and I just want to show you what the difference is in spring pressure that you would see if you just installed it and didn't care. So right here, we got the Buxton spring tester, and we did a test here. Now we're at 102 on the seat, 254 open. We're 95 thousandths away from coil bind, and this is, the spec is 105 on the seat and 253 open. So we are within the percent of the spec, but what's it gonna do when we add the amount that the lock is off? So we are 37 thousandths plus, right? So we have to add 1.316. It's going to take away spring height. That means you have to add it to the install height. So it would be 1353 is the difference. So we went from 1316 to 1353. What's it going to do for spring pressure? When you look at that, let's do that one more time. Make sure we're right here. That is right. So we have now lost 10 pounds of seat pressure and 20 pounds of open pressure. All right, so before we rake these dudes over the coals, I just want to reiterate that a valve lock is very, very hard to make. And I know this just because I'm friends with all these people, and I know that You know I have a friend of mine who was going to make them, and they learned very, very quickly that it just wasn't it's very easy to mess it up. And although that's not like an excuse for what you have going on here, and the things that you guys can do that would be very easy to eliminate an actual issue, so you're not 10 pounds on the seat and 20 pounds open pressure less, is just measure it. Measure it, and then you can figure out if you want to run this lock or you don't want to run it and you want to put a shim underneath of it, whatever it is. I know that we went to a different manufacturer, and we had to kind of scramble to find some valve locks. You guys might not, if you're installing it at home and you don't know that the resources to have that, you're going to be in a bad spot. And that's why I wanted to put this video out, because these things happen, and they happen in manufacturing. And it's not like, oh, we got to hate that person and never use them again. It's just that they had a batch that came because they don't make it themselves, and the quality control didn't catch it, and now we're dealing with it. And that's okay, because that's manufacturing stuff. And you know, not everything is going to be perfect, but that's it. That's all I got. So be sure to like, subscribe, comment below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Toodles.
HeadGames!